everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Title Scoop. So we are continuing our talk on joint tenancy. We've obviously gone over the basics and the history, and then also survivorship. But today we're just going to talk about some of the issues we see. I will tell you the caveat with all of this is it's really state specific. So I'm going to give you these issues, generally speaking, but if you want to know specifically for your state, you either need to look it up in the statutes or call your underwriter so that they can help you. So one of the questions that we do see sometimes is, what if the deed is defective as to joint tenancy? It's not defective otherwise, but the joint tenancy statute isn't followed. Well, in that case, usually the deed is still going to be valid unless, of course, you have a state statute that says it's invalidated or void. But most of the time it's going to be valid. It's just that those grantees aren't going to hold as joint tenants. They're going to hold as tenants in common. So if you guys aren't sure and you get that, just call your underwriter. We're happy to look at it with you to make sure how you should actually look at that tenancy and who should be signing. Now that we're talking about signing, what happens if you have two people in title, maybe say a brother and a sister, and they're getting ready to sell that property? Do their spouses need to sign? Well, you can guess. It's really going to be state specific. And the reason for that is some states have dower rights, some have marital rights. So it's going to be really specific in your state as to whether the spouse needs to sign or not. So again, if you are not sure, call your underwriter. But the other thing to note is if you're ever not sure and you can't get the answer, you can't find it, it's probably not going to be harmful to have the spouse sign, especially if it's a conveyance, then you have her interest taken or his or her interest taken care of, and you don't have to worry about trying to go back later if you find out, oops, they should have signed in the first place. What about judgments and liens? Do those attach? Well, the short answer is it depends, because it depends on where we are in the life of this property, right? So this one's really state specific as well on how they attach, when they attach, if they stay attached. So it also depends on if your joint tenant with the lien against them is alive or dead, right? So generally speaking, when land is held in joint tenancy and the joint tenancy is not severed, a judgment or other general lien against one joint tenant is not enforceable against the land if that joint tenant dies. Okay, so again, very, very state specific. You're going to want to look up what you have to do. But again, this comes up when you have a joint tenancy and one of the joint tenants has a judgment against them and then they pass away. So we need to know, like, has it been executed on? Has there been a sale? What happened with that judgment? So again, we're going to ask a lot of questions. And again, we have to know what our state law is. What about federal tax liens? Well, these are a little bit different. A federal tax lien against one joint tenant, like any other kind of lien, is a lien only upon the joint tenant's undivided interest. Okay, so very similar. And if enforcement is not instituted during the lifetime of the joint tenant, the lien will expire at the joint tenant's death. Okay, however, there is a little bit of a difference as to the enforcement of a federal tax lien. And what that is when you have a regular judgment and there's an enforcement action on a joint tenant, usually that person's interest is taken out. So their interest is affected, but everyone else's isn't necessarily, again, unless your state has a different set of laws. But with a federal tax lien, there are federal courts who came down and said it affects everybody. So if they decide to enforce a federal tax lien, they take it to sale, then it divests everyone's interest, and then the remaining joint tenants actually have to take their proportionate share of the sale. So when you have a federal tax lien against a joint tenant and you're insuring that, one, you're going to want to put it on your title company to take care of, but you do also want to accept out the rights of the federal government to subject the entire fee simple estate in the land to a sale upon foreclosure of its lien. Just because, again, it can affect everybody's interest, not just one joint tenant's. So how do you terminate or sever a joint tenancy? Well, there's really three ways. One we know already, right? If someone dies, then a lot of times that's severed. Now, that's only in the case if there's two people in title. If I own it with my brother is joint tenants with right of survivorship, he passes away, I'm not a joint tenant because I'm one person, right? So that is terminated upon his death and I own the property. Obviously there's some steps you have to take if you do that. And again, make sure you call your underwriter if you have a joint tenants with right of survivorship, because some states do require affidavits or proof of death and things like that in order to make sure the property is held in the right person's name. One of the other ways that you can sever it is by mutual agreement. And that's exactly what it says. You can do it by deed, you could do it by an agreement, you could do it by contract that you're selling and you're both agreeing to sever this. And there's a few other ways to do that as far as mutual. Then there's involuntary, and that could be by partition, that could be a levy of execution. It could be some type of lien enforcement. So again, you're going to want to know your state law. Some states divorces actually sever it, and some states it actually requires the divorce agreement to specifically sever it in it. So just again, I know a lot of this has been state specific, but I really wanted to make sure you guys knew how this is handled. Oh, one more quick thing on judgments. Again, state specific, but there are some state liens, public liens, assessment type liens that actually are going to stay attached. So you need to know that in your state before you determine whether or not you can remove it or not. So, all right, that's it for today. I know that's a lot of information. Let me know if you have questions. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.